whether or not non-unanimous jury verdicts are unconstitutional. Holly, I wanted to give you an opportunity because I really believe this subject needs a lot of discussion, a lot of public education. For those of us that watch on Law and Crime on a Facebook, please, we'd love to see your commentary. But Holly, what are your thoughts? Do you share Jamie's concerns that this is a bad path to go down?
I do, and luckily the Supreme Court of the United States agrees with Jamie and I. And so really the case before the court is whether or not this non-unanimous jury verdict prohibition, which was issued a couple months ago by the Supreme Court, can be applied retroactively. So Oregon and Louisiana were the two states out of the entire country that had these that permitted non-unanimous jury verdicts. And a couple of months ago, the Supreme Court ruled that the Sixth Amendment prohibits that practice moving forward in the future. And now the question is whether or not thousands of people in the criminal justice system in Oregon and Louisiana are going to get this rule applied retroactively. And I think that it absolutely should apply retroactively. Bob, you speak about educating the public about what's going on. And what's going on in the world right now and in our country is that we have a giant racial divide. These practices were implemented in Oregon and Louisiana to prevent Catholic, Jewish, immigrant, Black jurors from having their voice be counted when they were in the jury box. And so, and that is something that, these were developed in the 30s. These rules permitting non-unanimous jury verdicts. So if we're really truly trying to heal our nation and to heal and bridge the racial divide, as I believe we all want, or a majority of the country wants, the first place to do that is to prohibit these practices moving forward and fix the past. And there's only a few circumstances where the Supreme Court can actually apply this retroactively. And I think this is one. When we do this, Bob, we send a message to states, to DAs, to prosecutors, to voters, letting them know that even if you do find a workaround that results in a racist move that prevents our community from having a voice, then even if that practice is permitted for years, it will be made right at some point in the future. And if that is troubling and hard for the criminal justice system to redo all of these jury trials, that might prove as a consequence the next time we're trying to impose such a decision that really infringes on the Sixth Amendment right.
Yeah, Jamie, I'm going to give you the last word on this. What do you think about that racial angle that Holly brings up? And, I always used to say to my prosecutors when I trained them that do it right, do it clean. Even if you can, doesn't mean you should, so that this way it could withstand constitutional scrutiny when it goes through the appellate process. Because to Holly's point, there's nothing worse for a prosecutor than having to retry a case because it never gets better. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, so I agree with Holly. Her presentation was extraordinarily elegant in that regard. Look, it should be hard to convict someone of a crime. We should have to work really, really hard to take away somebody's freedom, remove them from their family, and hold them accountable for whatever the allegations might be. And any attempt to circumvent that and make that easier on the state is completely contradictory to what the founders anticipated. As far as race is concerned, look, we know. I tried criminal cases for 10 years, and in the community that I was from, it was a miracle if we could get a African American on a jury panel. It just was the nature of the beast. We're a 80% Caucasian community where I'm from in mid-Michigan. And, at the end of the day, if we had one African-American on the jury, it was a miracle. But it was important because the vast majority of the defendants were African-American. And I can tell you that, as we pool juries, as you guys know, we pool juries once a verdict comes back and we try to get a feel for where their head was. An African-American or, a diverse panel as it pertains to gender or religion, it makes a difference. If you have a homogeneous panel, the outcomes become much more predictable and oftentimes prejudicial. And so, again, this to me is just one of the most troubling things that I've seen over the course of the last several years. And I hope that the Supreme Court will address this and affirm an individual's right to a trial by jury in a unanimous fashion.
It's all about the jurors. The jurors are jurors. Guys, excellent commentary. Thank you so much. Got to switch gears a little bit. A real tragedy out in California. An individual, Jerry Boylan, 67 years old, was a boat captain, has just been indicted by the feds for the death of 34 people. It occurred on September 2nd, 2020 at approximately 3:30 a.m. They were just 20 yards offshore in 60-foot deep water. The rescue people could not even get there because the fire was so intense. Many of them died below deck. There were a few survivors. Now, we're going to listen to the National Transportation Safety Board that did an extensive investigation with regard to this and some of the conclusions that ultimately were used by the feds in order to secure this indictment.
We don't know if that detector went off, and we don't have any record of its operational status. A crew member did state in one of the interviews that he thought he heard a faint alarm sound while he was on the upper deck, but he couldn't pinpoint where that was coming from. It may have been that detector, but we don't know.
Well, my next question would be, I don't know if I read that same thing and said there might have heard a chirp, which would have been probably the smoke detector, but did the heat detector, what was its sound? Do we know? And do we know the crew, if the crew even knew what the sound of a heat detector going off is?
I don't believe so, because there was no policy or schedule for really testing and demonstrating its operation.
Okay, yeah, so that's a concern. If crew members don't know what the sound is, or passengers don't know what the sound of a smoke detector or a heat detector is, how are they going to know that there's an emergency? It's amazing that we have an unattended room that has battery chargers on it, a flat top griddle, 2 burners, refrigerators, and we have no regulations that require a smoke detector in there. Just amazing. We're asking the Coast Guard to revise the regulations to require all vessels with overnight accommodations to install smoke detectors in all accommodation spaces. I would hope that that the Coast Guard would take us up on this recommendation and make it a regulation. But I do know it takes time. So I would ask those other operators out there who have boats just like this, that a 2-pack of battery-powered smoke detectors costs $25 at the local hardware store. And I plead with you to go ahead and get these and install them before the regulation comes out in all your spaces, so we don't have a tragedy like this again.
Okay, that was from October 27th of this year. Now, the indictment indicates that Boylan caused these 34 persons to die, quote, by his misconduct, negligence, and inattention to his duties, which, as you heard, there were safety violations that were found, failing to have a night watchman, failing to conduct sufficient drills and training with respect to his crew, and failing to have basically the passengers properly vetted as well with regard to making sure that there's safety. Holly, let me go to a question that I have. It's a very serious indictment against this individual. He's facing a 10-year maximum. That's probably on each count it's a serious sentence here. There's a lot of people that died. But what about the civil ramifications? Do you expect the company is going to be sued for this?
Absolutely. I absolutely do. And I think that we've got an issue here where you see the worst case scenario actually does happen. A lot of times businesses and companies and organizations want to really make things efficient, and I'm not saying cut corners, but some of them do. And this is one of the examples. I think that this is going to be an example of a case. I think this is going to try to send a message. I think that it's obviously, we can see from the clip that you showed before this interview that we're trying to change the codes and the requirements within these structures, even though they're off of the coast. You're still in basically a tiny little space floating on the water. It's very dangerous. And so we have to implement these safety standards. They're here for a reason. And unfortunately, these 34 people that passed away are going to lead by example. This is an example of a company that, and a leader and a boat captain who is not following the rules. And the rules are there for a reason. When you're doing anything over water, you are 1 foot away from death at all times. So when you're on a boat, you have to do things differently. And as a business and a company that is operating a boat, you have to do things at a heightened level of safety, just like the airline industry.
Yeah, Jamie, listen, this is like right up the bailiwick of your law firm that handles these massive kind of torts that occur due to the negligence or malfeasance of individuals. What are your thoughts about the company being sued? I agree with Holly, the company is being sued, but what will they have to prove in order to connect the company to the negligence of the captain?
Mhm. So, Bob, the company is certainly going to be the primary target, but they're not the only ones. And Holly touched on this a little bit. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, there's going to be lawsuits associated with the products that were in the boat. So, Holly talked a little bit about, and it's been widely reported that batteries set off this fire. I think there's going to be a look at those individual companies and those individual batteries and the cameras associated with those batteries as to whether or not, excuse me, whether or not there's been previous defects associated with these products. So the civil lawsuits are going to be massive. The company certainly is on the hook, but they are not the only ones. There are going to be several other defendants associated with this lawsuit.
Right, and Jamie, yeah, I want you to kind of also let us know about this doctrine that we call respondeat superior as it relates to a company, and what that means. Like some people may say, well, why is it fair that if the captain didn't do what he was doing, that the company should be liable? How do you as a lawyer connect the company through that doctrine?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, Bob. So at the end of the day, we make money and we have responsibilities associated with making money. And in the event that you own a company, you own a boat, you own an airplane, whatever it is, if you employ people and in the course of their employment, you're making money or some other form of consideration, and in their stead, harm is caused, you are responsible. Respondeat superior means that you are responsible for the people that work for you and help you make money. That is part of the risk of being in business, and that is the reason that we have regulations to hold people accountable when they are not when they are not being accountable for the people underneath them.
Right, and Holly, with a thing like this, where fire is the worst thing you can have on a boat, and because of the risk associated with it, you would think that the company, and I bet this is going to be something that's going to be argued, had a responsibility not only to have policies and procedures in place, but to ensure that there was compliance with those policies and procedures. Do you agree with that proposition that the company is pretty much going to take it on the chin for this? And lastly, the question is going to be how much insurance they have, at least from the company's standpoint, because that is a factor that goes into a case, unfortunately, because the only thing the court can give in. Again, great commentary. Appreciate it. Going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.